There is a point where a life built on secrets simply stops moving. One night, a man sat in his car, parked right outside his own house, unable to reach for the door handle. He had no mask left, no smile, and no strength to face the people waiting for him on the other side. Going inside meant looking into his wife's eyes and seeing the fear he had put there. It meant facing his child, who had stopped laughing months ago, replaced by a silence that seemed to ask a single question: why? Everything had accumulated slowly, like snow piling up on a roof, until the structure finally gives way. The lies had grown too heavy, and the demands of the circle he had joined were now manifesting in his home. His child was waking up screaming, and objects were moving in the dark. When he finally opened the car door and walked toward the porch, it wasn't because he had found his courage. He entered the house simply because he no longer had the strength to stay outside. A double life eventually consumes the person living it. When the secrets become too massive to carry, the individual is left crushed, standing in the wreckage of a life they no longer recognize. His family was asleep, or trying to be. He sat in the living room armchair, the same chair where he used to laugh with his son, and waited in the dark. The clock read 11:47 p.m. The silence was so heavy he could hear the blood rushing through his own ears. Slowly, the air in the room began to change. The temperature dropped degree by degree, and the space felt as though it were shrinking. The atmosphere grew thick, resisting his lungs, making every breath feel like he was inhaling water. Even though he was alone in this empty room, he felt a gaze fixed on him, a look that didn't blink. It was an ancient, cold hatred that measured and evaluated him from every corner of the shadows. His body finally gave way. His hands slipped from the armrests, his head slumped forward, and he slid out of the chair. There was no violence to it. He simply collapsed like a gut sandbag onto the cold tile floor. Lying face down on the carrelage, he realized he had lost every ounce of agency. He couldn't save his family. He couldn't stop the darkness he had invited in. And he couldn't even command his own body to stand up. Total loss of control is the final destination for those who open doors they cannot close. In the end, the darkness doesn't just surround you, it renders you completely powerless within your own home. Face down in the dark, he did something he hadn't done since he was a child. He searched for God. There were no rehearsed prayers, just a simple broken whisper into the silence. Are you there? The response was absolute silence. He thought of the doors he'd opened and the lies he'd told, and he realized he had earned this void. To him, the silence of God felt heavier than the darkness itself. He stopped fighting, not just against the shadows, but against himself.
He stopped believing he was strong enough to fix the damage or save his family. He simply lay there, admitting he was finished. In that moment of total failure, something deep inside him finally opened. It wasn't a door he chose to unlock. It was a structural break in the walls he had built to protect his secrets. When a person is completely broken, the structures they used to hide behind fall away. Only when someone is entirely out of their own answers can a different kind of help finally reach them. He didn't use formulas or rituals. He just spoke his own broken truth. "Señor, help me. I have nothing left. I am exhausted and dirty, but I am here." Through his sobbing, a single phrase kept rising to the surface, repeated like a man drowning in open water. "Help me, help me, help me." The silence in the room changed. It was no longer a punishing void. It felt like a silence that was actively listening. The weight on his chest didn't vanish, but for the first time, it didn't feel like it was trying to crush him. Slowly, the blackness outside the window began to soften into gray, and then blue. As the first light of dawn entered the salon, the air in the house suddenly felt light. The room was just a room again. The lies and the circle were still there, waiting for him in the daylight. But as he sat up on the floor, he realized the spiritual isolation had ended. Someone had heard his cry. The next few days were strange. The fear hadn't vanished, but the volume had been turned down. Then at work, a colleague, a simple man he'd barely noticed before, asked him a question no one else had. "How are you? Really?" The man gave him a Bible, and that night he opened it to a page marked for him. He read the words, "Venez à moi, vous tous qui êtes fatigués et chargés." He sat in the silence, realizing those words were a direct echo of his own exhaustion. Alone in his living room, he finally answered that invitation. He spoke to Jesus Christ, not as a religious figure, but as someone who was actually there. A peace he had never known entered his chest, the deep, quiet peace of someone who is finally home. The following morning, he began to physically clear the path. He put his occult objects and secret notes into a bag, sent a final message to the circle, and blocked their numbers one by one. You cannot keep the darkness and the light at the same time. Stepping into freedom requires a definitive act of rejection, closing the doors you once opened and walking away from the chains of the past. That evening, his wife noticed the change immediately. She sat in the living room and told him the house finally felt like it could breathe. That night, for the first time in months, their child slept through the night without a single nightmare. Restoration was slow, but it was visible. The colors returned to the child's drawings, and the sun began to appear on pages that used to be filled only with dark scribbles. If you are in the darkness right now, you don't need to be strong or perfect to get out. You don't need to understand everything or have a plan for the future. You only need to cry out. One sincere plea, "Jesus, help me," is enough to reach the one who was already looking for you in the dark. When your strength ends and you are face down on the floor, Jesus Christ is the light that meets you there. He is the one who hears the cry, and he is the one who brings the dawn.